Good morning, everybody. It is Wednesday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, Assistant Sports Editor for Multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Joined for the Wednesday edition of the North Shore Drive by Ray Fittipaldo. Christopher Carter is on assignment, so you guys are stuck with me today. Ray, we got a lot to talk about. Lots more receiver talk. It seems like we're getting a new rumor every week. This week, everyone's talking about Cooper Kupp. It was Davante Adams before, Mike Williams. Now Cooper Kupp may be available for the Rams, and now obviously he's being connected to the Steelers by a lot of people. Going to get into that. Going to talk quarterbacks. There's been a little bit of, I don't know if backlash is the right word, but criticism nationally of Russell Wilson, even though there's been a lot of praise within the fan base, and in local media. So we're going to break that down. Also talk about Najee Harris, Joey Porter Jr. playing well, getting some praise from Coach Mike Tomlin. Before we get to that, just want to thank Edgar Snyder. They are our sponsor for today's episode of the podcast. We'll talk about them a little bit more in a little bit. But Ray, let's get into this this receiver conversation because I mentioned at the top of the show, Cooper Kupp may be available. He's a guy people are connecting to the Steelers because they need a receiver. But I got a question for you in terms of the actual fit of some of these guys, because when it was Davante Adams, I said on my show with Paul that, if you watch the receiver show on Netflix, that Davante Adams talked a lot about volume and needing to see a lot of balls to kind of get his momentum going, to kind of work the way that he wants to work. And it didn't seem compatible to me with a Steelers offense that already has George Pickens, that's not, throwing a ton to receivers not named George Pickens. Can you really get that kind of volume going for a guy and then still do the things you want to do with George Pickens and your tight ends? I had questions about that, and I think I have the same question about Cooper Kupp, because he's a guy that, during his career in Los Angeles, he's seen 20 targets a game at times. Ray, do you think there's a phenomenon here where people are just connecting names, big names, because they become available, where maybe there isn't quite the fit with what the Steelers have been trying to do on offense?
Yeah, I mean, listen, Adam, I think a good offensive coordinator can make any good player fit in his system. But I think we all know that the system that Sean McVay runs is vastly different than the one that Arthur Smith runs. So, I mean, that's first and foremost. I think people have to recognize that. If Cooper Kupp, let's say it would happen, he wouldn't come here and get 20 targets. Obviously, George Pickens is your down the field target. He's really good at that, as we saw last week with Russell Wilson finally playing his first game. So you don't really need a deep threat or a big play threat. What you would need is somebody who could be that possession receiver, a guy who can move the change, a guy who can be effective in the short and intermediate range for Russell Wilson. Cooper Kupp certainly would fit that. But there's another conversation to be had about the contract. The Rams supposedly would pick up some of the 2024 money, but the 2025 bonuses and the money in 26, you would have to take that on if you're the acquiring team. So, I don't know what the chances are of landing Kupp or any other receiver at this point. It's getting pretty late in the process. A lot of the good receivers are already off the board. But, to answer your question, I think they could probably use another guy who could help you in the intermediate, area of the field.
Yeah, let's flesh that out a little bit more, Ray. What do you think the package is going to have to look like for the Steelers to actually go and make a move? You mentioned that the good receivers are gone in a lot of cases. These guys we've talked about, Brandon Aiyuk, Davante Adams. But then there's a guy like Mike Williams that we talked a lot about last week. He's no longer the flavor of the week. Are these guys maybe more in the intermediate range and kind of more workman-like receivers, the guys that we're probably going to end up talking about in the end, in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, listen, what would it take to acquire a guy like Mike Williams? To me, a conditional pick, late round pick, a sixth or a seventh. I think despite what they said, I think there's obviously some friction there between Rodgers and Williams. They're 2-5. They're likely to be dumping salary before the trade deadline. So Williams would be somebody that would be a very likely candidate to get dealt, so they could dump some salary since they have Garrett Wilson and obviously Davante Adams. let's go back to Kupp for a minute. Let's say you did want to acquire him. You're not going to give a second for a guy you're going to rent and then part ways with him after the season. So, that would probably be more in the mid-round range. You could throw some other names at me. There's probably going to be a few other teams that are looking to dump salary in the next week or two. But yeah, depending on, which receiver you want to acquire, I would say it's anywhere from a third or a fourth to, a conditional sixth or a seventh.
What are some of those new names you'd throw out there, right? Because I know Courtland Sutton, a name that has come up a lot for people. But Denver has shown a little bit of resilience winning last week. DK Metcalf was for a long time, at least in Steelers fan land, and someone that a lot of fans would bring up. Who do you think are some realistic names beyond Mike Williams that you'd be looking at over the next couple weeks?
Yeah, and Seattle's firmly in the NFC playoffs as of now too. So, obviously, those teams aren't going to deal good players when they're in the thick of the playoff race. So, I don't know. You could look at teams that aren't doing well right now. With the Giants want to part with obviously not a Malik Neighbors, but would they want to part with their number 2 or their number 3? The Patriots, I don't know if I want any of the Patriots receivers. Some people, might throw a name or two in there, but those are the types of teams and the types of players you would be looking at, Slayton, somebody like that. Would they fit with Arthur Smith? The one thing that goes unsaid here, Pat Freiermuth is going to need his targets. We saw Darnell Washington get involved. We all know how Arthur Smith loves to utilize his tight end. So any player that you would acquire, they're not going to get George Pickens types of targets. You might be more, as a number 2 receiver, maybe number 3 target in your offense, you might only be looking at 5 to 7 targets per game, tops. So, that's the type of player that you have to find. And that obviously has to be a fit in your salary cap and has to be a fit in your offensive system as well.
Yeah, there's just got to be something, for me, Ray, between the 3 combined catches that Van Jefferson, Calvin Austin had this past week, and something like Davante Adams getting a ton of, targets. And I get why people talk about them; they're the big names. I think the big headline this morning is DeAndre Hopkins getting traded to Kansas City. That's another name off the board, Ray, that I think a lot of people had on their minds. But is there room for that type of star level guy next to George Pickens? Do you really need that now that we've seen this offense? I think it's a fair question. So let me do the question this way. What do you think the level of urgency is for Omar Khan right now? Because on one hand, you can make the argument that they had a big night the other night with the personnel that they have, even though the receivers themselves were not particularly involved. And they did so against, some solid defensive backs. Sauce Gardner in New York's lineup the other night. But on the other hand, it's just what we mentioned. You had 3 receivers getting catches. If you had to put it on a scale of 1 to 10, what do you think his level of urgency in these talks is?
Well, before I give you a number, I think we should point out that the Steelers were the team and one of the teams that lobbied for the trade deadline to be pushed back. And I think that's key when we're discussing this, because I think they really, truly do want to see how these other receivers can do with Russell Wilson at quarterback. And, maybe that extra week or two can really help them hone in on exactly what they need. Now, I'll put a number on it for you on a scale of 1 to 10. I'll go 6. I think, if they're not going to pay lip service to it, if they're going to do more than that about what Mike Tomlin says about being that team, or, we're good, but we want to be great, then go out and get a guy. If you really, truly want to be a contender in the AFC and Omar Khan thinks a legit number 2 behind George Pickens can help achieve that, then I will say a 6. So I definitely think they're going to be active. They're going to have conversations. And I do think they're going to want to just look at Russ in this next game, see how the receivers do, and then obviously make a decision in a few weeks closer to the deadline.
Yeah, I want to pull at that thread a little bit before we wrap up this topic, Ray. How does the conversation change, do you think, going from Justin Fields to Russell Wilson? Because I think, Russell Wilson demonstrated the ability to go downfield a little bit better than Fields has in these past few weeks. Do you think that means that they'd be more likely to want to go out and get a weapon compared to, maybe the more conservative plan they were running with Justin Fields?
Adam, that's a hard question to answer at this point, because what we saw from Russ in a one-game sample, he got everyone involved, and it just looked like it. It looked like a different offense. I wrote after the game in my report card that 6 different receivers had receptions of at least 10 yards or more in that football game. So he distributed the ball really well. He was really on point with identifying who to throw to when there were blitzes, who was hot, who were going to be the targets. So, I really, honestly, I think that's to be determined. I think there's a lot of football left in front of us, and you got this game against the Giants, where I think we'll have a little bit better picture after that. And then obviously at the bye week, they're going to sit down, they're going to self-scout, they're going to make all kinds of adjustments. That's really the time that they're going to sit back and do a full evaluation of where they are with their entire roster, not just receiver, but other positions as well.
Well, either way, Ray, this long, strange trip on the receiver front is about to be over. I think, thankfully, for those of us who've been talking about it seemingly for years, even though it's only probably been months, with the Brandon Aiyuk situation. So we'll continue to monitor that. We are going to be right back talking about the quarterback situation writ large. Before we do, just want to thank Edgar Snyder again. This show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder and Associates. Whether you're injured in a car accident or hurt on the job, Edgar Snyder and Associates has helped injury victims for the last 40 years, recovering more than $2 billion on their behalf. If you or a loved one has been seriously injured in an accident, call 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. We are back on the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm Adam Bittner in for Chris Carter, here with Ray Fittipaldo, talking Steelers quarterbacks. Ray, maybe it was inevitable just because people nationally seem to love the topic, but there's been some backlash to Russell Wilson's performance against the Jets in the past couple of days. Lindsey Rhodes was on with Brian Back on Chip Hammond Football on Tuesday. Check that show out, but she was slightly unimpressed by Russell Wilson. Pro Football Focus ranked him 22nd in the NFL last week among QBs, largely pointing to his accuracy. Meanwhile, Jerry wrote in the Post-Gazette yesterday that the debate's over in his mind and seemingly in Mike Tomlin's. What is your reaction to the kind of late-breaking Russ criticism that followed, I think, some euphoria on Sunday night?
I don't know, Adam. If you want to nitpick, we could talk about the first quarter. It didn't look good at all. I thought the first drive they ran the ball really well. I think he maybe completed 1 or 2 passes. They got a field goal. I thought that was fine. The next 2 or 3 weren't good. But really, if you want to evaluate him on the totality of that game over 4 quarters, I don't know where that criticism comes from. As I just said in the previous segment, he distributed the ball, got everyone involved, unlocked George Pickens. George Pickens looked more like a number 1 receiver with Russell Wilson, a quarterback, than he ever did with Justin Fields. Pat Freiermuth, they threw the ball to him down the field. I thought one of the more underrated plays in that football game, Adam, was the way when Russ had pressure in his face, and he just took a sidestep and just sidearmed the ball to Pat in the flat there, coming across the middle, and that was a 20-yard gain. That was a play that Justin Fields cannot make. That's not a play that I don't think the vast majority of quarterbacks in the NFL can make. Maybe 5 or 10 others can make that play and make that throw. So I'm not sure where that criticism is coming from. If you really honestly want to judge him on a one-game sample, I would say he was close to really, really good in that football game.
Ray, I think there is, on a big picture level, the criticism of Russ is that he's going to be 36 and seems like a dead end on some level long term, even if he's really good in 2024. I think I've put myself in that camp. I think I was persuaded by what I saw the other night. I think it was more a matter of needing to see it. But what's your read on his possible longevity here, and kind of speaking to the view that
Yeah.
that Justin Fields is the future, and that the Steelers, for that reason, the Steelers should be more interested in him than Russell Wilson? Did he look like a guy to you the other night that can play 3 to 4 more years and have some level of a future in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, I don't think 35, 36 years old is all that ancient for an NFL quarterback these days, especially if you want to truly run a pro style offense. What we saw on Sunday night was just that. I think in previous weeks, with Justin Fields, we saw more of a, one or two read college type of offense where if it wasn't there, he was going to tuck it and run. And, we didn't really see him making his progressions or truly reading a defense. And that's what really Russell brings to the equation. I think we've kind of had this, dumbed down version of college football in the NFL in recent years because these young quarterbacks coming in, like Justin Fields, didn't have a chance to really develop or sit and learn behind a pro like Russell Wilson. Arthur Smith has talked about that, how valuable this could be for a guy like Justin Fields, who seemingly now is going to get that opportunity to sit and learn. And it's not just Justin Fields, it's all these guys who have to come in and play right away. They're not really being taught the NFL game in college. They're not in pro-style offenses, so they have to learn on the job. And sometimes when you learn on the job, you kind of get crushed. You get overwhelmed. You don't perform well. You get benched. You get traded like Justin Fields did. So what we see now is a pro-style offense being run by a vet. We'll see if that trend continues. But for me, at least, there's no reason to think that the Steelers cannot and should not do business with Russell Wilson in the future if he continues to play this way.
You mentioned the learning behind Russell Wilson for Justin Fields. Let me ask the question this way: what do you think the longevity is of having both guys in that room? Because that was something that Lindsay brought up on Chip Hammond Football with Brian was, Fields getting a chance to develop, kind of a la Jordan Love. Do you think he'd sign a deal to play here behind Russell Wilson for a period of time before getting his chance to take over? Or do you think that just the way he played in those first 6 games, that there's going to be a team that's going to give him 10, 15, $20 million that's going to be attractive to go somewhere else and start?
Listen, if he's offered a starting opportunity, he should go grab it. They don't come around all that often. I just don't know if it's going to be there, Adam. I mean, in the spring, no one wanted him. The Steelers got him for a 6th-round pick. So I think maybe I don't want to sell him short, but maybe people just think he's a good backup quarterback, which he is. And maybe people don't feel like he would be a starter. So I think, listen, if Justin has that opportunity, somebody wants to sign him for good money, he should go out and grab it. If Russell Wilson continues to play well. Otherwise, if that doesn't happen, if he doesn't have a lot of interest on the open market after the season ends, then I think given what we saw in the first 6 weeks of the season, he'd be crazy not to want to come back to the Steelers. If his ceiling for money is backup money and the Steelers can pay him, let's say $8 million, which is kind of what it was this past year when you look at the free agent backups who signed around the league. If they could fit him within their salary cap for that and he's willing to come back, I think it's a no-brainer. But again, if somebody out there wants to offer him a starting job, he should definitely jump
on it. Quickly, Ray, do you think there's any chance that they trade Justin Fields if things continue to work out with Russell Wilson? And there are some takers that might want to give the Steelers a higher draft pick than they gave up to get Justin Fields.
No. If Russell Wilson gets injured again, we know that calf injury was aggravated in the past. They know they can go back to Justin Fields, manufacture game plans, and get victory. So there's no way that I'm trading Justin Fields in any scenario this season.
Yeah, Ray, I agree with you. I just know that is a conversation that's been out there in some spaces. So I wanted to get your opinion on that just because we're talking a lot of trades here. We're going to come back and talk a little bit more about the Mike Tomlin news conference on Tuesday. Talk about Najee Harris, Joey Porter Jr., big days from them this past week. Before we do, just want to thank another sponsor. This update is brought to you by Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci, mesothelioma and asbestos lawyers with over 85 years of experience. Call them now for a free consultation. We also have a message for our friends at Moon Honda.
To build the Honda CR-V Hybrid, we took everything you love about the CR-V and kicked it up a notch with greater power for a CR-V unlike any before. Adventure confidently with Honda, car and driver's most awarded brand in 10 best history. The CR-V and CR-V Hybrid, part of the Honda line of rugged vehicles. Visit your local Honda dealer where new vehicles are arriving daily. Buy online or reserve from select Honda dealers.
We are back on the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm Adam Bittner in for Christopher Carter, talking with Ray Fittipaldo about Najee Harris. Ray, I wrote my PFF grades post on Tuesday, and the data really liked him. I think sometimes with running backs, they don't get credit if the blocking is good, and they get all the blame if the blocking is bad. But in this case, the data is saying that there has been a big difference in the last 3 games, that he's averaging 4 yards per contact after carry compared to where he was around, I think 2.5 in those first 4 weeks. So have you noticed that difference in him, that the data is suggesting that he is running the ball better, and it's not just a matter of the jigsaw puzzle that has been the offensive line early in the season, that he is getting stronger as the season goes along?
Yeah, I wouldn't even frame it in terms of yards after contact, because I think Najee's always had that in his game. If you look at that long run against the Raiders, he did a really nice job of sidestepping Robert Spillane and really making the bulk of that long run on his own. That was blocked up well, but he had to elude one guy near the line of scrimmage, and he did it. And, in that Jets game, they had another long run that was blocked up really nice. But to me, the key to him the last couple of weeks, it's been springing those long runs, which we really haven't seen out of him in his first 3 seasons in the league. So that's the most intriguing part of his game right now. To me, with Najee, you always know that he's going to run hard. That's never been an issue with him. He's a pretty good receiver out of the backfield, but if he can continue to add that big play element to your offense, it could be huge. And we haven't even seen, the true Jaylen Warren yet because of injuries and because Najee's been playing so well. So to me, that backfield can be a lot better once Jaylen does get more involved. But, from what I've seen from Najee so far, I think this is his best season as a Steeler. He's more of a complete back once you add that big playability. And that's, I think that's certainly good news for Arthur Smith when he's trying to dial up, successful plays that are going to help the Steelers manufacture more points.
Some irony, Ray. Najee Harris's grade is tied for first in the NFL over the last 3 weeks at Pro Football Focus. The person he's tied with is the guy he replaced in the Steelers' backfield, James Conner. So both of those guys running well. How sustainable do you think that this is, Ray? I think you spoke to it a little bit there, but can he keep producing consistently like this and be that? People just wanted him to be Derrick Henry, right, immediately, and prime Derrick Henry in this Arthur Smith offense. I think that's kind of a high bar to set for him, one of the best of all time. But do you think it's going to be a matter of, as this offense continues to flesh things out, that there's just going to be more and more opportunity for him?
I think now that you have the potential, not even potential because we saw it, now that Russell Wilson can stretch the field and the safeties aren't going to be able to come down into the box and do those run blitzes like we saw early in the season, I think Najee Harris is going to have more room to operate. And that goes the same, for Jaylen Warren and Cordero Patterson when he comes back to the lineup. So anytime you have a passing game, teams aren't going to be able to tee off like they did early in the season. I can remember that Broncos game. It's kind of a slog on both sides of the ball for Denver and for the Steelers. They were just run blitzing at every opportunity because they didn't respect Justin Fields' ability to throw the ball down the field. And that happened in subsequent games as well. So, I think Harris can actually be more productive. Now, he is going to start sharing time with Warren as Warren becomes healthier. I think you saw that in the snap distribution in this most recent game against the Jets. So, Najee's touches are probably going to go down a little bit, but there's no reason that he can't continue to be effective. I think he will be, as long as this passing game is effective as well.
Ray, Joey Porter Jr. got some praise from Mike Tomlin yesterday, specifically on how he's preparing and developing, kind of behind the scenes. What have you seen from Joey Porter Jr. In terms of year 1 to year 2 growth, which is sometimes, the most that you will see from an NFL player?
Yeah, I think he's had ups and downs this year, but obviously the Jets game was really good. That was encouraging. It's interesting when I look at the Steelers defense in the secondary, the high pedigree guys aren't the ones who are producing the turnovers. You have 0 turnovers for Minkah Fitzpatrick. I think Joey has just the 1 interception, right, on the season. And then you have guys like Beanie Bishop, who has 2. Dante Jackson has 3. Deshaun Elliott has contributed. So they've gotten a lot of their turnover production from guys who aren't the high draft picks or the former All-Pros like Minkah. So that's a good sign to me. Eventually, Minkah is going to get his. Eventually, Joey, if teams throw his way, he's going to get his too. So I think, to borrow a phrase from Mike Tomlin, there's even more meat on that turnover bone for the Steelers because Porter and Minkah really haven't gotten going yet when it comes to that kind of production.
Ray, anything else stand out to you about the Mike Tomlin news conference? Usually we talk about it a little bit more on the Wednesday show, but was there anything interesting, especially in terms of injuries, that it's worth bringing up here ahead of this game against the Giants on Monday night?
Yeah, I think good news in the secondary. Dante Jackson is going to play, and DeMonte KZ is going to play, so they're getting healthier there. It's one more game, but after the off week, they're going to get Cam Sutton back in the fold. And I think Cam Sutton, not just in the slot, but his presence is like a chess piece in that secondary, moving him around. He could play outside, inside. He could play safety. There's going to be so many. This defense is going to be much more multiple after the off week than it has been now, just because Cam Sutton is such a heady player, such a smart player, and really fits the Steelers defense well. So I don't know what that's going to mean for Beanie Bishop. Beanie played really well against the Jets. They're probably going to try, to find a role for him at some point. Maybe that's when Cam goes outside, or maybe that's when Cam goes to safety. But I don't think we can overestimate, what that's going to mean to the Steelers defense after the off week. So one more game with Beanie in the slot, but I think the Steelers defense can get even better in the second half once Cam Sutton returns.
Certainly will be interesting to watch. Ray, thanks for joining me. I know you got to get down to the facility. Great conversation. Everyone else, Chris will be back on Friday, so make sure you subscribe to the channel. I'll be back with Paul Zeiss on Thursday. Also, we will be doing our post-game stream on Monday after the Steelers face the Giants at Acrisure Stadium. So subscribe to the channel. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Help us out in the YouTube algorithm. We always appreciate that. Otherwise, we will talk to you again real soon.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.